The Business in Wales podcast, sponsored by Sinclair Group, the business media for Wales. Hello and welcome back to the Business in Wales podcast with me, Daniel Bevan. As you can see, we aren't in the usual studio today. We are at the Parkgate Hotel in Cardiff to host a marketing roundtable. We've got some fantastic topics and even better guests to talk about them. So without further ado, let me introduce the panel. Next to me is Emily Gallagher from Ubiquity. To my left is James Robinson from Hello Starling and Will Meredith from Golley Slater, and to my right is Rhys Flowers from Four Cymru and Kate Mann from Cowshed. Thank you so much all for joining us. First of all, let's start with how busy is the marketing landscape at the moment? We're just post-election, so I can imagine there's plenty of briefs flying around at the moment.
Yeah, I think for us in particular, we don't do a huge amount of public sector work, but within the contracts that we do have, we've noticed this election in particular has been extra strict, and there's been a lot more sort of rules and regulations around it now. So I'm really hoping that now that's done and we can all sort of move on. We're certainly seeing the communication pick up a little bit, but I did feel in conversations with clients and things, this election in particular was extra sensitive. So hopefully we can put that past and crack on now.
Mm-hmm. And a big change as well. We won't speak generally about the election, general election, but you know it is obviously quite a different landscape, not just politically but also socially as well. You can definitely feel the tide turning. So, how does that affect the marketing industry at the moment? Do you think?
Most of our work is public sector work, so you know, up until sort of the pre-election, it's all gone quiet, and to be honest, it hasn't restarted yet in terms of Welsh Government. Everything is still on a bit of a hold, so we're just waiting for the plug to be pulled, really, and then to go.
Do you think that's mainly down to just politicians getting their feet under the table for now?
Well, it's quite a seismic change. You know, it's the first time in devolution in a quarter of a century where there's a genuine change of government. So it's all very new. I think it's only Aidan Jones who has any previous ministerial experience, for example, in the government. So they're all going to want to put the stamp on it, their own stamp. They all want to know what's going on and try to get a grip on things. So it is going to take a little bit of time for them really to start implementing their vision. But I think because it has been cleaner, they're going to do a minority administration without a formal coalition. So there is at least some clarity, and it's going to be actually interesting. I think it's going to be more evolution rather than revolution. I think if it was a government of a different colour, I think it would have been a very different sort of kettle of fish. But no, it's quite refreshing, I think, that it's actually going to be a bit different, you know, because I think things potentially did get a bit stale, and, you know, well, after a quarter of a century, the same party in power, it's only natural, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Before we get into our first topic, does anyone else want to come in on that?
So much about what we've seen since the election, but since April with the new financial year, we've seen this sort of reinvigorated energy and excitement in the market. Full stop. There seems to be more money available. People are bringing new briefs to market. People are looking to change agencies. I don't think that's necessarily hinged on a change in political parties in power in Wales, because we do quite a lot of work in England as well. So I think from our perspective, things like the war in Iran haven't really filtered down to us. We haven't really seen any impact of a change in government in Wales, but it just does feel that this new financial year, there's a little bit more optimism and buoyancy in the market.
I'd agree with James. The UK ads sector is going to push through 7 billion for the first time ever. And that's indicative of quite a buoyant sort of marketing environment for us all. The economy is doing better than forecasted. So there is optimism. There's still the cost of living crisis, which we're all engaging with. But as marketeers, we just have to work harder and do more with less, as we always have to.
I think what we're definitely seeing is much higher competition in the landscape currently in terms of the number of agencies bidding for work. So it's just about demonstrating the impact, the potential impact you can have, and also what sets you apart, which we're going to talk about today. But going back to the new government in place, then, I think the internal teams at Welsh Government now need more support than ever in terms of the briefing of the new ministers, especially with the huge new number of MSs that are now in place as well. So there's so much work going on internally, then of course it's going to take quite a while for actual briefs to trickle through.
Absolutely. And just coming off the back of what James and Will were talking about there, so mentioned about the cost of living crisis, and everyone feels like the belts are tightening ever so slightly. I speak to business leaders every single day, and they all tell me that things are, the cost of doing business is higher. But it's interesting that it doesn't seem to have trickled into the advertising sector just yet, or at all, really. So talk me through that and how you square that circle.
It has trickled. We're not immune to rising costs and national insurance rises and all of inflationary impact of running a business. But I think what people in our sector, we're very good at thinking on our feet, and we're quite able to be nimble. I think that's because we work with clients whose briefs are so diverse, and we have to be spinning lots of plates all of the time. I think agencies in general are quite well positioned to pivot quite quickly and make decisions that can have a positive impact on their business. But we're definitely not immune to everything that's going on in the outside world. But we've had a few years of diminishing budgets. There's definitely been a task of do more with less, and there's an expectation that we actually deliver more results on with fewer resources, less budget. So but I definitely don't think we're immune.
No, absolutely.
And just on that, from the flip side, where a number of our clients are public sector, then the scrutiny is huge, understandably, because we're in a cost of living crisis. So therefore, we have to demonstrate that every pound we invest is being spent in the right way and is going to create the outcomes that we need. So it's absolutely about creating less wastage and making sure that everything's really effective through having the strongest strategy based on really understanding those audiences, because otherwise, how can you demonstrate value for money and ensure that any public money is being spent effectively?
I think there's the age-old adage, isn't there, that half of my marketing spend is wasted. The problem is I just don't know which half. I think in the modern day, that argument can be turned on its head through attribution and performance-driven marketing. I think the challenge for us as agencies is, as James said and has been alluded to earlier, is to do more with less. And the way we do and achieve that is through performance marketing, being more precision-focused and ensuring that any spend that we do have delivers against the audiences and the consumers that it's targeted against. And that's our challenge. And I think as we go on and talk about other things, including AI, it is a huge opportunity for us around this table and for agencies in Wales to actually leverage the power of AI to deliver and outperform the larger agencies.
I think we've certainly seen a shift in the last sort of 6 to 12 months from, we're constantly asked to do more with less money. We get that. But I think the last few months when we've been having conversations with clients, I don't know, there seems to be a shift that they are getting it a bit more. And I think we can have more of those honest, direct conversations of we aren't going to be able to achieve what you want to within this budget, so let's work around it and let's try and create some ideas. And I think I've certainly seen that they've been really receptive to that honesty and think, right, what can we do? What can we? And as James said, we can be agile and look at different, bringing in different channels or different sort of strategies to achieve what they need to. But I think it's really great. We've seen a really good change sort of amongst our clients, that they're open to these new ideas and they realise that we aren't going to be able to sort of do what we were doing before and achieve the results we were achieving before because the budgets have been cut. So for us, it's been, really sort of exciting finally that they're sort of getting it. I think, it's been a long time coming, but they seem, the conversations we're having are a lot more open and they get that, times are hard and challenges are still there, but they're willing to work with us.
And I think just to add to that, the hope from our perspective, well, I think all of us on the table, is that we're out of the worst of it, because I think if you go back a couple of years ago, the climate was pretty grim. And just to add to that, to go back to the public sector, with a lot of the tenders we see in terms of the the structure of it, the cost, the scoring, the cost 40, 50, 60% and some of them, and it's just a race to the bottom then, I think. If you put in that much of an emphasis on the cost, then, I think people are cutting corners, and so we're just hoping that it's coming full circle. And as you say, that people are a bit more realistic in terms of what they can achieve for that sort of money. And as Will says, with things like AI and stuff like that, that's probably going to bring more efficiencies, and we can work, better with less. But I think from a client perspective, I think they are becoming a bit more aware that it's, there's an element you pay what you get for it.
I think as well, the government's new policy in terms of procurement for most advantageous tender really does support us as agencies, because it's moved from most economically advantageous to most advantageous in terms of other factors. And I think one of the key things for us, all of us really being Welsh agencies, is that we need to align our thinking towards added value, towards creating opportunities for people, young people in Wales, the foundational economy, and all the other factors that we can add as employers of really high valued careers in this industry. The entire creative structure and sector in Wales is important. It's 5.6% of Wales' GDPR. It's a massive hub within Cardiff, and it's something that we can all contribute to in terms of developing future talent and the future careers that this industry is going to need in an AI world. So there's lots of benefits for it. And I think the way that procurement is moving, it is going to support our ability to actually deliver on those promises.
Sinclair Group has been part of the motor industry for over 80 years. And in that time, we've learned it's not just about cars, it's about the impact we leave behind. We believe in driving change, supporting the people around us where we live and work. Because when our communities thrive, we all do. We offer new and approved used vehicle sales and service for some of the world's biggest motor brands. But what drives us goes far beyond the road. So whether you're starting your journey or continuing your legacy, visit sinclairgroup.co.uk. Belong for good.
Couldn't agree more with Will. And we've got a 7-year programme with Willows High School in order to bring young people through into creative industries who may not have previously considered that creative industries was for them. And I think it's so important to do that and make sure that all the communications, and that's what comes through in terms of making sure everything's really effective for the communities that we serve, and that everything, and by ensuring that actually teams are reflective of the communities we serve as well. So it all feeds into that.
Absolutely. And it brings us nicely on to the second topic, which is about ethical and impact marketing. We saw a huge rise, didn't we, in the number of businesses wanting to make maybe not a political statement, but certainly let everyone know where their values lie. Now that we have seen that change, not just here, across Europe, in the US as well, I wonder what everyone's thoughts are on whether that era has changed in marketing, or whether we're likely to see a resurgence of it now.
Well, I think we've had a lot of posturing around what's ethical and what's right. And I think there is still absolutely a place for being ethical and doing the right thing. That won't go away. People still want that. But I think the posturing has been, almost a spotlight has been shone on it now. So I think consumers are a lot savvier. They know what to spot, and they know if somebody's greenwashing, or they know if somebody is making claims that probably are stretching the truth a little bit. And I see from myself, just work that we have done over the years where you will receive a brief and the client will put in the brief that we adhere to these values and we do these things. But when you start working with them, it's quite apparent that they don't follow that. So I think what will happen is people will clock onto it a little bit more. And I think it will become a bit more consistent across the board.
You see it in the tenders, though, don't you? And I think there's always that, certainly the last 12 months, when you look at score, and you mentioned, Jodie, around commercials, we're up to 50, 60%. You look at tenders now, and, the social value and all of that sort of stuff is scored equally, if not sometimes more, than approach to strategy and what you'd want to do. And so I think it's about, there's definitely a place for it. And I think I agree with James. I think there's a place for it, but I think we need to remember, we're a commercial business. We need to get what the client, the results that the client wants. Ultimately, that's what we're here to do. So I struggle sometimes when it feels that it takes more importance than the actual work we do. It's just a constant balancing act.
And what I would add to that point about scoring within bids is that it's rare for a client then to come back and ask you
100%.
and evaluate the added value and the social impact that you did. So I do sometimes feel that we're doing it and it's right to do it and we do it, but it feels sometimes a bit tick boxing because nobody ever asks you about it again. And you go, well, I've done it.
Or it's
I've
not
done
scored,
it,
but you just
or
need
it's
to
not
do it.
scored,
Yeah.
but you do it. So I do think that it's important to have, but I think it needs to be evidenced. And if they're asking us to do it, I think they need to set time aside for us to talk through that and what the long-term impact of that is.
I would just add, I don't think it's ever going to go away. I think it's going to be a call for it, but thinking at it from a client side and with some of our clients in food and drink, and just touching on the dangers to greenwashing and the prevalence of it. I think what you'll see is that increasingly maybe companies will look for independent verification. So, for example, in the food and drink industry, I think we're up to 13 or 14 Welsh businesses who are now certified B Corp. So rather than maybe them saying they're working more sustainably and doing this and that, I suppose it's looking for more different routes because consumers are suspicious. People are just saying, "I'll be more sustainable with this and that." But at least something like an independent verification gives it a bit more credibility. Then
I think it generally makes good business sense to be ethical and to be conscious of the impact of our activities on the environment. We are in Wales. We are governed by the Welfare for Future Generations Act of 2015. And that gives us almost a framework in which we need to actually operate. We're also very conscious of our own contributions to carbon. The industry that we all work in is a major contributor to it. Digital advertising has got a massive footprint in terms of all those millions of ad impressions that we're serving and all those computers which are delivering those adverts. It is a prerequisite on us to face up to our responsibilities and to work with things like the IPA's carbon rules, the ASA's carbon rules, Ad Net Zero and all these initiatives which are in place really to provide a framework for us to improve our ability to engage with audiences without being at a detriment to the environment. I think, as Rhys just said as well, there is another factor to be considered, which is the authenticness that we can actually achieve through being, environmentally friendly. It is a world of AI. There's so much AI content being pushed out there. If your messaging is authentic and real and honest, it does resonate better with our audiences. So it's an opportunity. It's not something to be shied away from. We have to be more environmentally aware, but equally, as Rhys said, it is important in the age of AI to be authentic, to actually demonstrate the values that you have, because it sets you apart.
It's actually really interesting, and just going on that point, Will, I wonder if there is an element of alienating potentially a section of your potential customer base if you are making those potentially political but certainly ethical statements saying this is what we stand for. In a very polarizing world that we live in, you say that it can be a positive thing having those ethical stances, but do you not think that you're maybe closing off potentially some further customer base?
I think it's got to be authentic, and it's got to be a claim, any claim that you made. We are a highly regulated industry, so the Advertising Standards Authority and others would always verify any claims that we make in advertising anyway. So those claims, if they're ethical, authentic, and they endorse the brand, can only be seen as positives. People are looking for authentic experiences, and they're looking for community and, a sense of place. Rhys works with Ubiquity Cymru, and one of their sort of targeting methodologies is to really focus on the provenance of produce and the authentic sort of nature of things. That's what sells. That's what people are looking for. If you go to a supermarket and you're presented with choice on the supermarket shelves, if there's a point of difference to be made, then people should make it. Of course they should. And if that just happens to be environmentally friendly, ethical and green, well, all the better.
Just to come in on your point, because I think as well you were talking about the potential from a commercial point of view in terms of clients coming to you. Well, we make a choice in terms of clients coming to us if we don't feel like their values align with ours. So we've turned down clients previously because it's not a cause we believe in. It's not a client that we think we can work with, because if we're going to make these claims, then we can't then go and work. We can't work with an organisation that doesn't meet those. And also we've got a responsibility to our team who have bought into our culture that we're only going to work with people that are on the same level of us, that want to work towards a more sustainable Wales, want to work towards better communities. So that's a stance which we take, and it feeds through everything we do. So I think actually then it becomes a strength in terms of an employer as well.
Of course, Cowshed have worked on campaigns against violence against women and girls, and getting sanitary bins in toilets as well. So yeah, you've definitely put your money where your mouth is when it comes to the causes that you believe are important and absolutely are. And to build on that, I mean, obviously, when you're a consumer, and speaking as a consumer, if you are to be in a shop, for example, down the produce aisle, and you see something that's either, let's just give an example off the top of my head, Welsh lamb compared to lamb from New Zealand, you're more than likely, if you can afford it, go for the Welsh option. So how much is Welsh identity playing a factor in your thinking when you're taking things to tender? Sorry, when I say taking things to tender, I mean actually replying to a tender.
When replying to a tender, Plaid Cymru's got a procurement policy now coming in, which 70% of tenders are going to be awarded to Welsh businesses. That's massively advantageous for us as a Welsh business and for everyone around this table. Wales is as a place for marketeers is a community, and I think we as Welsh advertising and media agencies are well placed to actually engage with those communities. You can't do that with AI effectively. AI algorithms are US-based or international. They don't understand the intricacies of Wales, the language, the differences between Carmarthen and Carnarvon. All of that is where we are expert. And I think from us, from a Welsh perspective, for any brands wanting to communicate with the people of Wales, we are exceptionally well placed. So Wales is a place for us. It's home, it's where we live, it's what we're proud of, and it's what we market for.
Sinclair Group has been part of the motor industry for over 80 years, and we've never stood still. Because for us, it's not just about where we've been, it's about where we're going. We believe in progress, embracing innovation, investing in technology, and moving towards a more sustainable future for everyone. We offer new and approved used vehicle sales and service for some of the world's most forward-thinking motor brands. But our drive is always to the future. So whether you're starting your journey or continuing your legacy, visit sinclairgroup.co.uk. Belong for good.
Yeah, I think the word of the day, well, like you said earlier, you've been talking a lot about authenticity, and it just comes down to that. So as long as everything is reflective of the communities, and like you say, it's so variable, and I really couldn't agree more with you. And that's where our strength comes in AI, is that cultural nuance, and that AI doesn't understand, and that judgment. And I think that testing of creative when we're putting something together is so important, because we've just got to make sure it resonates and that people respond to it. And if they don't, then we've got to change direction. But it just comes down to being authentic.
I agree. And to answer your question about what we put in tenders, and I think what we find is that when we bid for work in England, we can take our approach from Wales, and people are quite surprised by it. So in Wales, there are around 3 million of us, a very large geographical area to cover. And to Will's point, the geographies are so very, very different. But when we work with clients in England, they see England as this sort of one big, it's a huge country, but it's very broad brush stroke, and actually bringing some of the authentic thinking and the regional thinking from a Welsh perspective gives us an advantage in England, because we think about communities and the way that those communities live their lives. So it actually, being Welsh actually helps us compete outside of Wales as well.
Fascinating.
And just to add to that, with the political changes we've just seen, there's potentially a bit of a reorientation in terms of not being so South East Wales focused, and having that understanding of the whole of Wales and the different cultural nuances. I think is going to be increasingly important, because that cabinet, Plaid Cymru's heartlands, etc., is drawn from the west, the north, and all over. So really having that deep understanding and empathy to different parts of Wales. I'm a first language Welsh speaker from the Swansea Valley. The Welsh I speak is very, very different to somebody up on Ynysmôn and Anglesey, for example, So how you bring that expertise to really reflect the different experiences of people across Wales, to engage with them better, in a more authentic way. And I think, with the new government, that might be more important, that sort of real understanding of Wales as a whole.
I think looking at agency landscape as well in Wales, I think the last couple of years, I think there seems to be a lot more open, people wanting to collaborate. And I think we've just got a lot stronger over the last couple of years. I think people are finding their niches. We're trying not to do everything at once, just focus on one thing and do it really, really well. So I think looking at it from a slightly different perspective, us as agencies, I think we're only getting better. And I think that's, we do quite a lot of work outside of Wales as well. So, when we have those conversations and we're sitting in those rooms with these, huge London agencies or Manchester agencies, and we're competing with them to a really high level, it makes me feel really proud, because we're bringing all of this sort of expertise and knowledge from Wales out, and probably doing a better job than a lot of them. So I think the more we can all work together, I've just really seen a shift. I think there's so much more openness. I think last couple of years, sometimes you're a bit sort of closed off. Everyone's trying to do the same thing. But I think the more we work together, share knowledge, collaborate, I think, we can take it outside of Wales and beyond then.
I agree with Emily. Some of our largest clients are based in England, and we often compete against London agencies. And what's great is that you look at Wales, and we can get to London within an hour and 45 minutes, Cardiff Central to Paddington. It's really easy to do. Some people can't get from one side of London to the other in nearly that time. Our cost base here in Wales is much lower. There is this sense of community that we have in Wales, and we do partner with other agencies to deliver work. We know that we are not the answer for everything, and that's fine. But I think clients look at us and go, actually, it's all right to have an agency in Wales. I think there's been a shift there. I think
Totally.
pre-COVID, there was absolutely this, we're in London, we must have a London agency. And that has absolutely shifted, because the rise of remote working and video calls, etc., that's really helped fuel that. So I think whilst I miss sometimes being in the office as regularly as I used to be, what I do enjoy is the fact that it opened the doors to other parts of the UK where we can really thrive.
Yeah, completely. We're working in Doncaster at the moment, for example. And again, you wouldn't have been able to do that piece of work previously, but it comes through existing partnerships and reputation that you build up, and definitely in terms of specialisms, like you're saying, Emily, where you sort of really lean into what you're really good at and what you're known for, and then you get those recommendations. But again, going back to James's point and applying the learnings in Wales and taking that model externally, what we do in Wales applies in Doncaster, because again, if we put that into AI, they're not going to come up with how everyone in Donny is talking and chatting and the language that they're using. And that comes from actually being in that, spending time in that community and playing back. So I think there's just huge opportunity at the moment. And I think that so many Welsh agencies are getting really well known and they're winning awards. And it's really building. And I just think it's going to keep growing.
And we've all mentioned AI at some point, so it's only fitting that we talk a little bit more about it and deep dive into it. AI and marketing, we've also talked a lot about authenticity. I mean, you can spot a mile off if someone's put a graphic together using ChatGPT, for example. It does feel like graphic designers are under the cosh at the moment. But naturally, when it comes to marketing, a lot of SMEs will see it as a benefit that they don't have to bring in somebody to do that kind of work for them. I wonder, from the bigger agency scales, from your perspective, whether you see it as a threat or a tool currently.
I think it's both. I think it depends on how you use it, and that will determine the answer. I think it will be a threat to... So just to be clear, we don't create any assets. We're not designers or a production company. But I think where it will threaten some roles is the low-value repetitive tasks. I think that will help shift that. But where it does really give an opportunity is then it gives time for people to have some more deep thinking and to actually do proper thinking, because we're often so rushed. We sometimes we skip that really critical deep thinking that is the most valuable bit to our clients, is our brains and our thought processes. That for me is that. But I worry for designer. Well, so in answer to your question about SMEs and doing that, I think the problem with using AI to do this is it homogenizes everything. Things start looking the same. And I think for brands, and especially small to medium-sized enterprises who really do need to cut through and work smarter to beat the big guys, they need a point of differentiation. And AI, I think, will homogenize a lot. It's just based on stuff that it's already been fed. It's not original thinking. It's not new, fresh thinking to answer a specific brief. It's using what it already knows and what it's already seen to create something. So it's not unique. So I think it has a place, and I think it's a threat and a tool depending on how well it's used.
Yeah, it'll start going away, and it is quite frightening in some ways, the way that I've seen it develop, and we play and and sort of and test it and things like that. I think what I feared is a lot of those entry level jobs might get a bit sort of scarcer over time. But from our perspective, it's if we can work more efficiently and effectively, but it doesn't have an impact on the quality of the work, then hopefully that means from a client's perspective that it becomes more cost effective for them in terms of what we can do in less time. But you need that critical thinking, that expertise to be sort of looking at what you're feeding into it and adapting and so forth. But it's just going to run and run, isn't it?
I think it's a massive opportunity for all of us collectively. We're in that kind of Goldilocks space as agencies. We're big enough to be able to embrace and adopt AI and employ data scientists, data analysts, the AI orchestrators to develop our solutions. But we're small enough not to be encumbered by legacy sort of ways of working. That's why the big agencies are struggling, because they are slower, they're bigger ships to turn, and they have to adopt these new technologies and new ways of working. We are very agile in Wales, we always are. It's a massively competitive landscape, so any sort of innovation that can be brought to part is brought to bear quickly with agencies in Wales, and that's why it's been adopted so quickly here. I do see it a threat for entry-level roles, but those roles are changing, because if you came into an agency 20 years ago, you'd have been doing an account management, an admin role effectively. Those roles are going to disappear, and invariably they will change and they will become more data scientists. STEM-led opportunities within agencies are going to be much more critical because of the need to actually digest all this data that we're all generating, to understand what AI is telling us, to actually determine how best to engage with consumers and audiences using AI. So I think it's a massive change for us all, but for us as agencies of our side, it is a huge opportunity and one which we should all embrace. I started my career in media back in the late 1900s. I started at the kind of death of newspapers, really, or I shouldn't say death, maybe the decline of newspapers. But, I've transitioned through times of working with Google when Google was adopted. I joined Golley's before Google was founded, and worked through the digital age and now into the AI age. It's just the new frontier for us, guys, and it's something really, really exciting because there's so much that we can do in the AI space, which provides a level playing field with these big network agencies that we're all up against. They can't move as quickly as we can. This is an evolving space, and we are very, very agile and well-placed to make the best use and benefit of it.
Yeah, I think for us it's net positive. I think similar to James, we don't do huge sort of conceptual brand pieces. I think creatively it's a slightly different conversation, and I see that probably that seesaw swinging a little bit more to threat, but certainly going back to the point at the start of discussion around the budget constraints, I think the opportunities it gives us to be agile, to looking at audience insight, we can test things now a lot quicker rather than spending thousands of pounds in focus groups. We can show different messages and really work a lot harder for our clients for a lot less money. So I think from an audience insight perspective, testing, I think the tools it's allowed us to work with from a programmatic perspective and the access to data and measurement that we can get, I think all in sort of that world, I think it's totally changed us as an agency in the last 12 months. So bring it on. Bring more of it on.
Sinclair Group has been part of the motor industry for over 80 years. That's not just a number, it's generations of trust built on shared values, because family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you choose to stand with, and that's what matters to us. We offer new and approved used vehicle sales and service for some of the world's biggest motor brands, and trust, that's at the heart of it all. So whether you're starting your journey or continuing a legacy, visit sinclairgroup.co.uk. Belong for good.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said, really. I just think it's a tool to be helped to support efficiency and to allow, like James said, that bigger thinking, because that's ultimately what you need to do now, because everything's going to become really generic otherwise. So it's got to be original thinking, and it just goes back to that authenticity, and it needs that injection of authenticity and original thinking in order to cut through.
All our clients want from us is strategy, innovation, and creativity. Those three things. AI enables us to do that more efficiently and effectively. So it's got to be a great thing for all of us.
Wonderful. Well, that was a really interesting conversation. And just one more topic to go through, which perhaps it means we're covering a little bit of old ground, but hopefully it's still an interesting discussion nevertheless. If you're winning contracts beyond Wales, which all of you are, I wonder what your thoughts are in terms of trying to compete now in a slightly more globalized environment, particularly when it comes to the internet and AI, for example. These markets are ever smaller, or at least they feel ever smaller, because we're so culturally entwined with other countries as well as Wales. So how can you break out of being a Welsh business and be able to market more globally?
I think specialisms travel regardless of what geography that you operate it within. We're a pure play media planning and buying agency, and it's very easy then. That's a very easy story to tell people. And I think what we do is we are very confident in being Welsh, and Will talked a lot earlier about authenticity and knowing geography. Those are really transferable. So we have clients who are based outside of Wales, but also some clients who we work with outside of the UK. And it's the thinking that we bring from Wales that I think is really valuable, because we have this massive geography, a small population, but it's a really complex picture in some parts. The populations are sort of the conurbations are bigger in some places than in others. There's languages, there's multilingual communities. There are, I think, over 20-something languages that are spoken regularly in Wales. So that really helps us. We understand what it's like to translate and ideate in using different languages. And I just think specialisms travel. I think if you're a generalist, I think it's much harder. But I think the thinking that we bring from Wales definitely helps us play in a bigger pond.
I think sometimes it's really easy for us to feel in this bubble, in this Welsh bubble, and we, I think it's only when you have conversations outside of Wales, UK, I think you realise, you're in these rooms and having these conversations, and actually you've got, whether it's the product you're looking to sell, a strategy, that the talent you've got in your room, they actually want, and they're so much more welcoming to new ideas, fresh thinking. So I think it's quite easy for us to sometimes maybe undersell ourselves a little bit, and it's only until you get into these rooms. We're fortunate enough to do quite a bit in the States, and actually you go into these rooms and you think, oh my God, there's agencies 250 plus and they're going to know all this. And actually you talk through some of the, the tools we've got access to and some of the work that we've done, and they're just so much more receptive than I think we expect. And you think, okay, actually maybe we do know quite a lot. So I think it's really important to get out of that bubble, and then you come back and you think, actually, we've got a hell of a lot to offer. And so I think it's that mix. I'm really proud of all the Welsh work that we do, but equally being able to sort of translate that across the border, across the seas, it just makes, you can step back and think, actually, we've got a lot to offer here, and we just need to keep having more of those conversations outside of Wales, I think.
Dan, I think it goes back a little bit to how you started today's podcast, where you were talking about the sea of change in politics. And I think that is a little bit what we're like as agencies. So whereas there's this thing where we've always been a little bit sort of kept our light under our bushel a little bit. We don't like to cause too much fuss. We're proud to be Welsh, but there are bigger questions to have between Cardiff Bay and Westminster. And I think it's a little bit the same as agencies that are based in Wales. We need to be a bit more bullish and have more. We need to back ourselves. Yeah. I think that's what it is. We need to back ourselves. And
we're fantastic.
We
need to be saying that a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's absolutely not a question of capability. I think it just goes down to confidence, because we've absolutely got everything that we need to be able to do work internationally, and we work internationally, attracting people back to Wales. And so it goes back to just, again, understanding those audiences and knowing what's going to work for them. So I definitely think it's a confidence thing. And as we've said, if you've got that specialist, you've got that framework, that can be adapted anywhere in the world.
We often say, don't we, that Wales, we don't shout about ourselves enough. And it's funny to hear it in this context as well.
I think, not to be negative, but I think there's definitely a profile issue, isn't it, in terms of, for a lot of people, they don't quite understand Wales and, our place in the world. But ultimately, from my perspective, I think, we're large enough to matter, but small enough to be agile and be competitive. And I think that's come up quite a bit in terms of, we are a bit small and we can move a bit swifter and things like that, but there's enough of us as well to make an impact. So as long as we remember that, I think, we can definitely make our mark, not just in Wales and the UK, but, across the world.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone's saying. I think it is incumbent on us to recognise that Cardiff is becoming a hub for real creativity and talent in our sector. It always used to be London, perhaps Manchester. Cardiff has been talked about now in that same sort of level of creativity and opportunity, really, for advertising agencies. And as you mentioned, there is talent here in Wales. There's talent that we can nurture ourselves, and I think it's incumbent on us all to do that, to offer opportunities, like you mentioned, Kate, creating opportunities for people within our businesses to ensure that the future talent comes through. But equally, we are able, within Golley's at least, to actually draw talent back from London. Our head of planning at Golley's is ex-Essence, and she's somebody that's come back to Wales because there is an opportunity now within an agency to actually deliver the talents that she has, to explore her skills, and she's got the confidence that the agency that we have is going to be able to give her the career opportunities that she's looking for. We need to create wealth, we need to create opportunities for talent, and we need, as everyone said, to recognise that the wealth of talent within Wales can compete at any level. As Chris Coleman said, we're not little old Wales anymore. We are, a force to be reckoned with. And I think a lot of the sentiment that we've talked about today about collaboration, would love to collaborate with you all and try and win some more business over the bridge. Why not? Why can't we?
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much all to Emily, to James, to Will, to Rhys and to Kate. That's been the Business in Wales podcast marketing roundtable special. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've made it this far, then comment authenticity. I think that's probably been the word that's been coming up the most. But of course, like and subscribe as well. And get this podcast on Apple Music, YouTube and Spotify as well. Thank you once again to my fantastic panel. Until next time, take care. The Business in Wales podcast, sponsored by Sinclair Group, the business media for Wales.